Good evening, everybody. I'm teacher Mavis or Miss Mavis or Miss Tan, or some students just call me Cha. Hello, good evening to all of you, students and parents. Welcome to a survival guide to Sec 1 English and Literature. Let me share my slide first before I continue. Please let me know if you can see my slides, okay? Thank you, Safwan. Okay, so yes, this is a survival guide to Sec 1 English and Literature. So today, before I tell you what to expect in Secondary 1 English and so on, I would just like to find out from all of you, uh, how many of you are Mind Stretcher students? So you have started your English classes with us at Sec 1. Okay, just give me a sense of my audience today, okay? Just give me a sense of my audience today. You can just raise your hand. If you're a Mind Stretcher student, you can just raise your hand, okay? So that I get a sense. Thank you. Another question is, what has your school covered so far for English language? Okay, what has your school covered so far for English language? What about literature? Has your school spoken to you? Or have you met your literature teachers? So give me a sense, okay, in the chat. Let's interact using the chat function. Okay, my chat is open so I can see your responses. So what has your school covered so far for English? I know you just started, but I'm sure lessons have also started. It's the second week. Is it which component? Writing, comprehension, which component? Okay, give me a sense. Okay, so while you are sharing your responses with me, let me let me talk to you a little bit about this idea of survival, okay? So when we say we come for a survival guide session, what exactly do you have to survive at secondary school? Okay, how are you going to survive? And who are these people whom you are going to surround yourself with to survive this journey? So let's talk about survive what first, okay? Yes, thank you for sharing with me. I see some responses already. If you have any burning questions about secondary school, about learning English at secondary school, please feel free to ask me in chat. I've taught secondary students for about 16 years now. I've interacted with many batches. So I will try my best, okay, to answer your questions. Now, at secondary level, as you've just entered secondary school, second week, right? Uh, there are many challenges you are going to encounter, right? Uh, Firstly, besides academic challenges, at this age, as you are growing up from childhood to teenagehood, it could start to get challenging in terms of, for example, trying to deal with different types of pressure. It could be peer, it could be social, it could be academic. You might be trying to find your footing. You might be trying to find your tribe, your kind of people, kindred spirits, people who understand you. You might be trying to figure out what you really want. Who are you as a person? What is your moral compass like? What kind of people do you want to hang out with, whom you believe are good for you, supportive when you need help? Okay, so socially, in terms of friendship wise, there's a lot going on, especially now you're starting to make new friends. If you haven't made any very good friends, it's normal. Okay, it takes time. But the family front, as you move on to teenagehood, and if your parents are watching as well, it's another ball game, right? Because now you are older, you are dealing with forming your own identity, you're trying to have more autonomy, more say, more freedom. And the way you communicate might be different. The way you communicate with your parents might be different. So that could cause conflict at times. Okay. So then you are going to learn how to resolve conflict. You are going to learn how to negotiate. So in terms of family, when it comes to interacting with your parents, that would be another challenge. And then in school, academic wise, you now have all these subjects in English language. So although this is a survival guide for English, all your subjects except Chinese language or mother tongue will be taught in English. When you learn history, geography, social studies, all these are written and taught in English. Your ability or your mastery of the English language will help you to better comprehend these subjects, will help you to better tackle the questions in these other subjects. So when we talk about English at secondary level, I want you to not just think of English as in the English exam or the English exam components, but how you are now older, you are going to learn to use this language in a way that would benefit all aspects of your life. In school, outside of school, in your communication and interaction with all kinds of people. Okay, so that's something I want you to consider at secondary school. How are you going to survive? Firstly, surround yourself with supportive people. Sometimes we take some time to look for the right group of people for us. Supportive family members, trusted adults, and of course your school teachers and your coaches, okay, to be there to support you. I'm sure your parents already tell you this. Hang out with the right group of people. Sometimes it takes time for you to realize whether the group you're hanging out with is the right group or not. That's part of growing up. Okay, so always remind yourself to pause before you make a decision because there are going to be a lot of temptations at secondary level. And that includes gadget use and so on. Okay, so surround yourself with a group of very supportive people who will always be there to cheer you on. But more importantly, as you grow older, you realize you have to do cheering yourself on by yourself a lot more. When you were younger, the adults will say, "Oh, you are very good, you know, you need to do this, you can do it." But as you grow older and as you become an adult, you realize very often you have to be your biggest cheerleader. Okay, so these are some of the things that you'll have to survive as you move on to secondary school. Okay, let me see what I have in chat. In the meantime, if you have any question about English language at secondary level, just ask me, okay, in chat. Okay, some schools are starting editing, some schools identifying tenses. So we are looking at schools really easing you in, right? Grammar, basics of grammar, narrative writing. Narrative writing is very similar to what you did in primary school because that's exactly what you did for PSLE. You wrote story. Okay? Fill in the blanks for worksheets. So what I'm seeing now, it's most schools, based on what the students have responded, is that the schools are trying to ease you in. They are giving you the basics of grammar, which is extremely important. Okay? Now, different schools have different plans for their students. So sometimes I will hear some students in Sec 2, they'll tell me, I'll ask them, so has your school done situational writing? And they'll be like, no, I didn't do situational writing in Sec 1. Okay? Some schools would start expository writing in Sec 1. So it really, the schools have freedom to decide how they want to chart your learning. Okay? Especially at lower secondary, before you move on to upper secondary. So some schools might choose to focus on certain components first, but at my stretcher, we are going to expose you to all components right from the start because we believe that the longer runway you have, the more time you can practice these skills. It's like when it comes to oral communication, should you only start practicing in year 3, that will be a bit late, right? So we start from year 1. Okay? Let's move on to the next slide. Now, if you're wondering and you're not so sure, parents, maybe you are wondering as well, what's the difference between the primary school and secondary school English? So if you joined our P6 bootcamp, I would have shared some things with you. Okay, I say I'll tell you more when you go to secondary school. So now is the time. At secondary level, there are still 4 papers, right? Secondary English, there are still 4 papers, but there is no more MCQ and fill in the blanks. Though your schools might be doing it now to just diagnose how strong you are in grammar or to just make sure that you get sufficient practice and you know your grammar rules, etc., before they teach you more things. Okay, I'll share more components with you. So the main things would be essay writing, situational writing, editing for paper one. Later I'll show you. And then comprehension is the only thing in paper two now. And of course, there's still listening and oral communication. Okay, these things remain. Okay, now O levels, at O levels in year four, there are, like I mentioned, 4 papers, but you will realize that writing in primary school was 25%. Now it's 35%. So it takes up quite a lot of 100%, right? And oral, still 20% because they increased the percentage in primary school. So oral is 20%, quite a large chunk as well. Paper two, of course, 35%. Listening is still at 10. Okay, so this would be the weighting at O levels. Are there any students doing IP? Can you give me a show of hands? IP? Okay, thank you. The IP curriculum, different schools will have different programs and paths and courses or modules, however they want to design for you. But at the end of the day, IP means you don't take the O levels, but eventually you take the A levels. And at the A levels, you have to write essays for GP. You have to do comprehension. Okay? So writing skills, reading skills, speaking skills, regardless of whether you are taking O levels or not, you will need these basic skills. Okay, so in our curriculum, G3, we have a lot of IP students in our G3 classes as well. Okay, trying to make sure that they build their foundation in reading, writing, and speaking. And of course, not all IP students are very strong in English. Okay, so that assumption is incorrect. A lot of IP students actually need extra help in reading, writing, and speaking. Because very often, another assumption is also that since the assumption is you are strong in English, therefore you don't need so much help. And therefore, a lot of school teachers may leave you to go and do your own independent learning, or they will give you tasks and assume that you know what to do. You know how to do it. And this has happened to many of my students. They come to me and say, teacher, I'm not sure how to do this project or assignment. And I ask them, so what instructions or guidance did your teacher give? Oh, nothing. They just pass this assignment, this 1-page assignment to me and just say complete it by a particular date. So then I will have to guide them, right? So at Mind Stretcher, because we take you through the building of these skills, when you need to complete these projects in schools or assignment in schools or tasks, you'll be more confident, okay, and more capable. Comprehension is now 35% compared to 10 because PSLE paper 2 had many other components. There are also now 3 comprehensions, okay, as you can tell. There's A, B, and C. Your school may have exposed you to section A, that's a visual text comprehension. Okay, section B is a narrative comprehension, like a story. Okay, and lastly, section C would be a non-narrative text. So since we're on this page, let me just elaborate a little bit, okay? Comprehension first, since I'm here. In primary school, you had your visual text comprehension, 5 MCQ questions, right? So that's visual text comprehension. At secondary school, you also have 2 texts, but now the questions can be open-ended. It's a mix. Okay, so there'll be open-ended questions. Section B, it's a narrative. In primary school, when you look at your comprehension passage, very often it is a narrative, and it's often based on a local context. So you look at the names, there'll be like words that you're familiar with as a Singaporean, okay? Like East Coast Park and words like that. So it's very local. But when you look at Compre B text at secondary school, and as your school exposes you to more of these texts, you realize that now the texts can come from anywhere. It could be a story inspired by World War II from a soldier's point of view in another part of the world. You have never been there, you have never read a text like that for comprehension, but now you're going to be exposed to this. And this actually matches your age as you grow up, right? From a child, you are sheltered, you're protected. Whatever the schools provide and at PSLE, everything is accessible to you, right? But as you grow older, the expectation of a growing teenager, someone who eventually does year 4 at 15 or 16 years old, is going to be more mature, is going to be more curious about the world outside of Singapore. Plus, you're also learning your history, literature, geography, right? So you are exposing yourselves to other parts of the world, and therefore it matches whatever you're going to be exposed to in English language, okay? So the text they choose, they might not be familiar to you in terms of setting, characters. And that is why your reading skills, your ability to read for answers, even in an unfamiliar setting, will come into play, okay? Section C, comprehension, is a non-narrative text. So like an article, okay? Or a paper discussing population or poverty or social media, something factual. Okay, it could be an informational text. And then for that section, you do a 15-mark summary. Okay, we'll dive deeper into that later. So now your compre paper, there are 3 sections, and each section they're testing different things, right? Visual text comprehension, your understanding of PAC, narrative comprehension, a lot of use of figurative language, um, literary devices. Sentences are a lot more complex, characters more complex, a lot of inferential to be done. And then for section C, when you read an informational text or something factual, are you able to understand the main ideas and summarize them? Okay, so these are new skills, which you will learn and sharpen over time. Okay, let's take a look at some of these key differences. Somebody asked how to study lit. Okay, I'll address this later on. Thank you, Ting Li Hun. Okay, this is just a summary if you are curious, right? In mainstream schools, mostly we don't have all these components anymore, though I want to tell you something about synthesis and transformation. Synthesis and transformation as a component in the test is no longer there. There is no synthesis and transformation section. But your ability to synthesize and transform sentences or ideas will be tested in summary, will be applied in essay writing. Because in essay writing, they're looking at whether you can construct a variety of sentences, right? Whether you can create a natural flow in the way you express your ideas. In summary, are you able to keep the main idea? That's what you did in primary school, right? You're not supposed to change the meaning of the sentences, but re-express it. So are you able to do that for summary writing? Okay, so S&T skills, extremely important in secondary school. Okay, grammar and vocabulary is important throughout your life as long as you're using English language. Okay, in terms of oral, for some schools, milestone checks or learning checkpoints, for oral assessment, they might give you speaking project like create a podcast. Okay, in the IP schools, it could be a much larger project where you have to do research, okay, create a sort of a media format, and then conduct interviews, etc. So different schools have their own plans for students, but you still need to speak regardless, okay? And listening comprehension in mainstream schools, yes, and you must do note taking. So tonight, a lot of things I'm saying are not on the slides. I am just speaking. So tonight you're actually practicing your listening and note-taking skills if you are taking down any notes. If there's anything I say that makes you pause or makes you think, I want to find out a bit more, just jot it down. Okay? Note-taking and listening skills. During English classes in mind stretches, does it include literature? Okay, I'm going to share this a little bit more. Why not do it now? Okay, I'll do it now. In my stretcher, we don't have literature as a course, or we don't have worksheet called literature. But we do have a component in our G3 classes called literary analysis. Literary analysis. Okay. So in literary analysis worksheets, let me show you a sample. Okay, since I'm talking about it already. So I have some slides to share with you, but I want to also make this free flow to some extent based on the questions you are asking me, okay? So let me share my screen. Okay, can everybody see my screen? So this is an example of a literary analysis worksheet. So in literary analysis worksheets, we expose you to it could be unseen, it could be prose, poetry, and then we give you some skills you need, get you to practice some skills that will benefit you when you do literature in school. Okay, like unpacking texts, uh, understanding the use of language, because literature, it's how language is used, right, to achieve certain effect or impact. So we do have literary analysis worksheets like that, looking at quotes. Okay, like here, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. And then we study. So what does it mean? If you look at it literally, a stage is a stage, right? You see it when you go to a hall, you see a stage. But what does it mean figuratively? What is Shakespeare trying to say? What is Shakespeare doing with the use of these words? So it's no longer what do these words mean, but what is he suggesting? What is he trying to achieve? Okay. And of course, analyzing what is his purpose of saying this? What is he commenting on? What does this tell you about his perspective of certain observations of humankind or life? Okay. So we do have worksheets like that. This is one example. Okay. And we also teach you how to answer questions. Now you realize that these questions are like maybe 1 mark. In literature, a single question could be 5, 10, 15 marks, right? But in our literary analysis worksheets, we do want to teach you how to answer simple language use questions because you will see them in comprehension B, the narrative comprehension. Questions like that can be asked in comprehension. So are you able to answer them completely in a way that will get you the mark? Okay, so that answers the question. Do we cover literature? We do not cover literature, though we are going to line up some literature master classes and workshops throughout the year. Okay, so keep a lookout for that. Okay, let me go back to my slides. You can keep your questions coming in. Okay, so let me move on. Now, in paper one, it's not just essay writing and situational writing. There is this thing called editing exercise. So for G2 students, every line there is an error. For G3 students, 2 lines are correct. The other lines contain an error. And in primary school, everything is marked out for you. You just have to make sure that you can spell the word and you can give the correct form of the word, right? In secondary school, there's no more spelling errors in editing. It's all grammatical. There's no punctuation errors as well. All grammatical errors. Okay? And of course, you have to circle the right word and write down the right answer. Just now I was talking about G2 and G3. Can I just have a show of hands? Other people cannot see you, only I can. If you are in our Mind Stretcher G2 class, can you just give me a show of hands if you're in our Mind Stretcher G2 class? Anybody? Okay. So in school, eventually in the exams, the G2 paper is going to be less demanding than the G3 paper, right? But our G2 curriculum is designed in a way to help G2 students move to G3. So it will stretch the G2 students. Okay, so if you are a G2 student and you are in our G2 course, please, I hope you're aware of that we are not preparing you just for a G2 exam in year 4. We are preparing you to give you a shot at moving to G3 if that's your goal next year. Okay? Because if we design our materials just for G2, then when you look at G3 or if you do go to G3, you'll find that, oh, there's quite a stretch. So we've designed our G2 materials to stretch you enough and help you to achieve your goal of going to G3, of doing G3 English if you want. Okay? So that's a piece of information for you. Okay, so this is editing. Any questions at this point? Let me just pause for a little while. If a question comes up, just ask me. Okay, so grammar is really, really important. It's assessed in every single paper, even in oral communication, in terms of your accuracy in language when you speak. Are you using the right tenses? Are you using the right verbs? Are your sentence structures complete and correct? The examiners are listening out for those things for oral as well. So grammar is applicable every paper. Okay? The second thing is, since I'm talking about oral exams already, to be able to speak well. To be able to speak well. In primary school, you had to do two components, a reading aloud where you have to deliver a speech to a particular audience for a particular purpose in a specific context, right? At secondary level, you are no longer given a script to read. You will be creating that script. Okay, so by year 4, oral exam, you'll be given a video. You'll watch a video. You'll be given 10 minutes to draft your response. After 10 minutes, you are going to speak to the examiner based on a prompt. Okay? So it is a mini presentation. Well, there are no slides. You don't need to bring props, but you are going to some extent, perform in front of the examiner with passion, enthusiasm as you speak. It's all in the rubric. To speak effectively to achieve a particular goal or intention or purpose. Okay, so you're not going to read your to speak to the examiner monotonously. Okay, you're going to express yourself as expressively as possible to get your ideas across. So speaking well, one thing, it's the delivery. The delivery has to be clear, convincing, okay, coherent. That's delivery. Then the other thing about speaking is you need to have content. So in the 4 years, your school and Mind Stretcher will share with you a lot of content. Okay? Various kinds of content. Because at your level, whatever you're learning in geography and history, don't just chuck them aside. Use them in your conversations. Use them to support or use them as examples to support your opinions. Okay? So general knowledge is important. Even if there are things that do not interest you, read, find out, be curious, and think about them. Don't just look at something and go, oh, no response. Look at something and ask yourself questions. Do you agree with what you're seeing? Do you think it's right? What can be changed? Is it easy to change it? Or is it going to take a really long time? Whatever you see around you, question it. Question it. Not for the sake of uh not for the sake of it, but because you want to train your brain to ask questions and ponder. This ability is going to help you in many ways, including when you're doing your conversations, your oral examinations, and your essays. Because the essays, later on, I'm going to show you some essay topics. The essays require you to not just talk about what happened, but what do you think about what happened? Or what do you think can be changed? So when your brain is used to being curious and your brain wants to find answers, then you're exercising the muscles. And when there's a conversation, an essay topic, you won't be like, I don't know, or huh? And then you get stuck. If thinking about something is a habit, then every time a question comes up, your brain has a way of asking questions and organizing ideas already. Okay? So this is something you do every day. When you look at an advertisement, question it. Is it effective? Why is it effective? Why is it not effective? Why is that advertisement better than this? This helps you in your visual text comprehension. This helps you in just being a more literate consumer, okay? Someone who is more critical of what you see around you, okay? And if, let's say, a policy is being passed, like in Australia, right? They ban the use of social media for children and teenagers. What are your opinions about that? Do you think we should have that in Singapore? What do you think of having to put your handphones in a locker all day in school? Do you have an opinion? Not just, why like that? That's a very casual opinion. How do you feel? Why do you feel this way? Why do you think this was done? Can this be done in a different way? If it's done a different way, what are the repercussions? Hmm. Are there alternatives, etc.? So get used to always extending your questions and thinking, okay? This will help you in the long run, whether you're anywhere you go, being curious is a superpower, okay? So general knowledge. So over here, for example, in our editing worksheets, we don't just say, okay, do editing. We discuss questions. We give you links to watch, okay, just to expand your general knowledge. And then we get you to discuss and speak up in class, okay, in complete sentences so that you're practicing that skill. Over here, just now I said speak well, right? So over here, when we do presentation mastery, or presentation mastery is the component in our curriculum that prepares you for oral communication, okay? So we provide some sentence stems to help you construct complete sentences. So if my question is, how would you feel if you were one of the participants in the picture? Why would you feel this way? You cannot just say, I would feel excited because I like buses. There is no elaboration, right? There's no extension. Okay? Learn sentence structures and we will help you, provide you with the sentence stems or different ways of expressing your ideas. I would likely feel very blank because, or given my interest in this, I would be feeling extremely. So different ways of expressing an idea, like synthesis and transformation, okay? So that you can develop your ideas further. In a conversation question, if this were posed in the exam, do you think hobbies are a waste of time? Why do you feel this way? Okay. So again, are you able to state your opinions? This is an extension of primary school, right? So in primary school, if you were with Mind Stretcher, we taught you the peer structure. Peer structure is still relevant at secondary school, okay? We still use it in our secondary worksheets. So don't forget these structures that you learn from primary school, okay? Always state your point, your reasons, examples, relevant experiences, any sort of reflection or recommendation for a solution, and then summarize, close your sharing. And all these things can be learned. So if in primary school you were not such a confident speaker, at secondary school you'll continue to develop that skill. Okay, with more support, but also you need to understand that now it's more demanding because of the topics. Okay. And what examiners require of someone at your age, at your maturity level, to not only be able to share a point like that, but to think about it more critically and to talk about it. Okay. Essay. Has anyone written their first essay in secondary school? Some schools might give you a diagnostic. So they want all of you to just write an essay. Your teachers want to get a sense of how well you write. So at primary school, most of you would have written a narrative, right? That's why we use the story mountain and we use vivid words and phrases to engage our reader, to make it highly interesting, and then we score our top band for composition. So in primary school, if you have done very well in composition writing, good for you. You have done well in narrative writing. But there are many types of writing, and at secondary level, you'll be expected to explore further. So if you are very good at narrative writing, it doesn't mean that you automatically can write an expository or an argumentative essay, correct? Because the skills are very different. Okay, so at primary school, story based narrative and story arc, right? Story mountain. There was a picture stimulus. So you choose one out of three pictures. There was a topic given to you, single phrase or a single word, and you have quite a lot of freedom to decide what to do with that word or phrase, right? And then you can choose a picture. At secondary level, um, there is no more picture, and you'll be given a question, not just a phrase or a word. If your parents are around the same age as me, during our time for O levels, there are single word questions, and you can pick those. Those are for, especially for very creative students, they love the single word questions because they can write anything, they explore that topic fully. But now, they're all statements, questions. Okay, later on, I'll show you some samples. At lower secondary, many schools will start the students off with reflective recount, narrative, because it's super familiar to you. You did narrative in primary school. So the most natural way to get you into secondary English is to get you to write a recount, something that happened to you, and then reflect about it. Okay? But it's not totally the same. It's not totally. In fact, the requirements are quite different. I'll tell you a bit more later. Okay? So at secondary level, we write essays. Situational writing, it's very different at secondary level. I've shared this for those of you in P6, if you have attended our workshops, situational writing at secondary level is very different, a lot more demanding. So the essay is 30 marks. Now in primary school, your essay 36, 14, right? As the composition has a lot more weighting. At secondary level, you see the weighting, it's 15, 15. It's the same. The essay is 30 marks. The situational writing is also 30 marks. Okay, so it's more demanding. Situational writing is more demanding. You'll be given a stimulus like a poster or a web page, and you're supposed to use the information to write a letter, an article, a proposal, And it's much longer now because there are quite a number of requirements that require your own ideas. So it is not given in the stimulus. Remember in P6 last year, you had one bullet point with the underlined, with being underlined, right? And then the requirement is for that underlined point, you share your own opinion. And for most of you, that takes up only maybe 1 to 2 sentences in your situational writing. So for now in secondary school, it could be a lot more lines, paragraphs even, okay, for you to expand. So situational writing at secondary level, it's really testing your ability to amplify. Take a point, put yourself in that situation. What would you say to meet the purpose, audience, and context requirements? Okay. On top of that, you need to, if the purpose is to persuade, then you need to use persuasive language, right? Okay, so then do you know how to be persuasive in writing? So those are skills that you will learn in secondary school. Okay? Oops. So these are some O-level essay questions just to give you a sense, okay? I'm going to stay on this slide for a while so that you take this in. If you look at 25, 24, 23, the past 3 years, of course, you can go to any bookstore and get the 10-year series if you're curious. Okay? These are the type of questions you'll be given in year 4. And like I said, it's not single word questions anymore, right? Do you realize that they are not asking you to write stories anymore? Even something like write about a time when a gathering with family or friends did not go as planned with amusing consequences. It's not so straightforward. It's no longer a family gathering. Now there are conditions, there are things you have to fulfill. Did not go as planned and amusing consequences. It's a recount, but you need to be very descriptive as well. You need to have wide vocabulary. You need to know how to use your writing techniques to engage the reader, right? You need to be able to reflect. If something doesn't go as planned, what was the experience like for you? Why did it turn out to be very amusing? So even for something like that, that could look the most familiar to you compared to what you were doing PSLE, the demands are different. There are certain structures that you will learn at secondary level, okay, to recount effectively, to reflect effectively, right? So this would be reflective recounts. But if you look at the other questions, you realize, hey, I really need to have an opinion, right? Like I told you just now, being competitive is not always desirable. Do you agree? Why or why not? This could be an oral exam question. It could be a conversation question. So conversation, so this is very important. You can take this down. Conversation questions, oral exam questions, and essay questions. If you are trying to build content, build them. Every time you're building content for an essay question, you're also building content for your oral exam, right? Being competitive is not always desirable. We're talking about competition and growth and stress, right? So these things you can also use them when you're having a conversation, right? So you need to have an opinion. Do you agree? Why or why not? And you need to have a full essay, an introduction, conclusion, at least 3 to 4 body paragraphs, each paragraph expanding a particular point, right? Okay, or I think this question is super interesting. Parents and grandparents have forgotten what it's like to be young, so it's better to get advice from friends. How far would you agree? Again, in your daily life, do you think about such things? Do you go, I don't want to talk to my parents, you don't understand, I'll talk to my friends. It does happen, right? But you're doing it so casually. It's just like complaining. You don't write an essay about it. So now if you have to write an essay about it, if you agree, what are your 3 compelling reasons? And for each reason, why do you say so? Provide examples, provide observations, experiences. to convince the reader that you're right, that we can listen to you and trust what you're saying. So at secondary level, with your maturity and with your expansion in general knowledge and opinion, we want you to explore these topics and talk about them confidently and convincingly. Okay? Yeah, so you need to have opinions. Okay, so this is any questions about essay writing at this point, since we are on this slide and you might be taking this in like, wow. Kyra says, wow. Yeah, but it's quite fun. The schools won't just tell you, nah, this is the question, do it. Your teachers will guide you in unpacking, same as in Mind Stretcher, right? Will guide you to unpack the keywords. What must you do to answer the question, and what should you not do, or else you'll end up writing out of point. How to organize your ideas, how to write an introduction, how to write a topic sentence, etc. So there are frameworks and structures, okay, to help you. But you have to be more reflective as an individual. Do the examiners want you at year 4 to write from the perspective of an older person, like an adult or an old man or old woman? No. They want to hear what a mature teenager has to say about these topics in good standard English. So you don't have to pretend that you're super wise, like a wise old man. No. You are a mature 15, 16-year-old. You have opinions because you are at this age, you have gone through some experiences and you feel strongly about one of these topics. And you are going to clearly write about them. Okay? So this is what you will work towards in the next 4 years. Okay? So just now I was saying some schools may not expose you to argumentative or expository topics yet. They might start you off with reflective recount, like write about a time when you experience a difficult journey, a difficult but interesting journey. They might start you off with things like that, okay? Because it's recount. But you need to also reflect now. What do you mean by difficult? Why was it difficult? Why did it turn out to be interesting? Is it upon reflection? Or what was this interesting experience you had? Okay, so at primary level, very often it's story, reflect. But at secondary level, at different parts of your recount, you could be thinking or analyzing that situation. So it's no longer so linear in a chronological order all the time, okay? Let's take a look at this question. Your school will definitely at some point cover media, right? Social media, cyberbullying, the use of tech. So let's say we look at this question. Cyberbullying has become a serious problem among students. They give you a quote. So this is somebody's opinion or something that people say a lot. And then they ask you a question. What do you think can be done to combat cyberbullying? What do you think can be done? This sounds a bit like some PSLE questions, right? When they ask you, what are a few ways to... Sounds familiar? So it is not all new to you. It's just now that you have to write it. Okay? So what do you think can be done to combat cyberbullying? If you have never written an essay like that, it's going to be challenging because you need context. What can be done to combat cyberbullying? In your mind, certain single words or phrases or sentences might appear. I might think, oh, okay, combat cyberbullying, we need to report the cyberbullies, or we need to stand up for our friends, or we just um restrict access to certain platforms, okay? Then if I ask you, uh, why do you say so? Are you able to explain fluently? If I ask you for examples to support what you just said, because you gave this suggestion, right? So you must think it's effective. Like, is there any evidence that this could be effective? Do you have the evidence? Are there times when this solution might not work? Have you thought about it? So if you have never thought about it, then you need time to think about it and build content. Building content doesn't mean you just sit down there and meditate and then the content will come to you. Times you build your content by reading news articles, by watching interviews, by listening to various perspectives. Some people say, yes, it can be done like that. Some people say, oh, these solutions are not effective because you listen to all these perspectives and then you ask yourself, so which ones align with what I believe? And then I'm going to have these key points in my essay, and I'm going to use some of these things I heard or observed, whether they are statistics or any form of evidence that is legitimate, that is convincing. I'm going to use them to support my point. Okay, so you build content. You also need language and vocabulary. So if all this content, I say put them in coherent paragraphs. Do you know how to construct these various sentences accurately? Okay, so that's another thing that you will be learning. Do you know the structure of how you can write an essay like that? Okay, so there are different expectations for essay writing. So it's going to be challenging, but you will learn. Okay, so this is just a quick recap of what you did in primary school. Everything is time-based, okay, in a curve like that. But at secondary level, when you do brainstorming, it will look more like a spidergram or a mind map because now we are branching out from the main question. The main question says cyberbullying has become a serious problem amongst students. Say, oh, cyberbullying is a problem. Is cyberbullying. Do you know what cyberbullying? Can you define it? You should be able to define it. If you don't know, then you need to go and find out, right? Define it. Why is it a problem? How do we know it's a problem? And it's such a big problem that you need to write an essay about it to discuss the solutions, It's so important. So your essay is very important, right? And when you're thinking about this problem, so what causes cyberbullying? What are the effects, right? And what are your solutions to tackle these problems? Are your solutions effective? Are there factors or conditions which will affect the effectiveness? So you need to discuss these things. Okay? So a question like that requires a different kind of thinking framework. Okay, no longer linear, but thinking about cause effect, um, problem solution. Okay, you will learn these as well. Your teachers in school and Mind Stretcher will take you through this. Okay, let me give you an example. Okay, say an essay topic, very simple one, just like that. Stars make poor role models for young people. Do you agree? Right? So some students or some teachers may advise and say, okay, you can write like that. Answer the question. I agree to a limited extent that pop stars make poor role models for young people. So did you answer the question? Yes, because it asks, do you agree? And then you wrote a statement to agree or disagree with it. This statement is grammatical. There's nothing wrong with it. But is it effective? Not really. Is it a good opening to an essay? Not really. There is nothing engaging about it. It doesn't provide any sort of context or background. And I like to pause here because something just came to my mind as I was talking about this, is that at secondary level, because you're more mature as well, right? When you are writing any piece, an essay, situational writing, don't see it as just an assignment to complete. It's very easy, right? Let's do another essay. Don't want to write. And then you get very sad and upset about writing an essay. Um, Take the opportunity to write an essay to express yourself. Use the opportunity to express yourself, who you are, what are your opinions, and take pride in it. So if someone pop stars make poor role models for young people, do you agree? Don't just say, I must write another essay. No, you say, let me think. Pop stars make poor role models for young people. Do I agree? I like many pop stars. all my Korean pop groups and all that. Do I think they make poor role models for young people? Are they poor role models for me? Disagree. Now you have an opinion and now you're passionate about your opinion. So use every opportunity to write an essay as expressing your personal opinion. And as you're doing that, learn to craft an essay that's clear, grammatical, and so on. Okay? So don't treat it as a chore. It's easy to treat it as a chore, but try to convince yourself to not waste the opportunity to express your views. Okay? So this is not very effective. So we give you samples, right? Instead of saying I agree to a limited extent, why are you even writing this essay? Why do I want to read your essay? Why is your essay so important? Think about your audience. What do you want them to take away from reading your essay, which that you had taken pride in writing? What do you want the readers to take away? Okay, so I'm not just going to just give them my bare minimum. Okay, I'm going to share some things. I'm going to use some structure. So this is a model introduction. So let's say I disagree. Pop stars are not poor role models. And I have some key ideas already. I had some key examples and ideas. Like I know certain pop bands who speak up against violence or cyberbullying. I know some of them, they make generous donations. Some of them, etc. They do a lot of good things. I have all these examples. So in my introduction, instead of just saying I disagree, I'm going to provide some context. Okay? Firstly, we're talking about pop stars. So why are we talking about pop stars? Because pop stars have great influence, like it or not, okay, on young people. And through not just their lifestyles, their songs, their performances, their involvement in social causes. And when pop stars do this, they can do a lot of when pop stars have such great influence, they can do a lot of good or evil. But I think most pop stars would do good because it's great for their image and their business, their personal brand. Okay? So an introduction like that provides some context and guides our reader into eventually your opinion that you do not think that pop stars make poor role models. In fact, you think that it is in it is good for them and for you when they make a very positive impact on young people. Okay, so that's as is it similar to oral? Alicia is asking. Is it similar to oral? To some extent, yes. In the oral, I mentioned there are two portions, right? One would be the planned response. You had time to plan a mini presentation, 2-minute presentation. Okay, so you use 10 minutes to plan a 2-minute presentation. That's one. And for that one, because it's a mini presentation, can you just answer the prompt? I agree, I disagree. No. You have an opening line based on whatever video you've watched and the prompt given to you. The prompt is very often like an essay question as well. So yeah, it is similar to oral. Okay? Comprehension. At this point, I just want to say this. I said this when you were in P6, I said the same thing. When you learn something in a particular component of the English paper, transfer that knowledge to all areas of English learning. Comprehension C, for example, the non-narrative text. Okay, comprehension, we have comprehension A and B here. The non-narrative text, the one on information, study their structure, study their use of language, and use it in your essays when you write an expository piece, right? So you can use comprehension passages to make yourself a better writer in paper one. In narrative text, the vivid use of language, you can use it in your essay writing as well. So comprehension passages are like now model essays, correct? So it's not just when we provide model essays that you just study the model essay, but good comprehension passages are also models. Learn from them, the way ideas are phrased, how ideas are structured. Okay? So that's my reminder to all of you. Whatever you are given, squeeze that resource dry, okay, to benefit yourself. Comprehension A, visual text, I've talked about it already. Narrative text, the use of language for impact, very similar to literature questions, the short, open-ended literature questions, okay? When they test your understanding of the use of literary devices, etc. Okay, now it's time for you to do some work. There is a short text here, and there is a comprehension question. I'm going to give you, let me read the text to you, okay? Then I'll give you a minute to answer this question in the chat. You just try. There's no real consequence, so just try. In the evening, she wouldn't dare strike out into the bush like this, as hippos came ashore to graze and leopards slipped down from their trees to hunt. Now, she just had to keep a wary eye out for buffalo and choose paths through open ground. Question. Explain fully why Mei Lin would be afraid to enter the bush in the evening. 2 marks. I'll give you a minute. Type out your answer. How would you answer this question? Fully, okay? Explain fully. 2 marks. Why would she be afraid to enter the bush in the evening? Okay, I'll give you a minute. Share your answers in chat, okay? Share your answers in chat. We'll see what, and then I can tell you why your answer is right or wrong. Hmm. Hmm. Another about 30 seconds. Okay, so you realize this text is not local context. Huh? This is not local context, right? This won't happen in Singapore, right? So this is what I mean, okay? The choice of text are going to come from all over the world, different eras, okay, set in different eras, time periods, okay? Any answers? I'll wait for another 10 seconds and then I'll see. Somebody asked how to improve English in secondary school. So along the way, I've shared things that you have to do. Um, skills like writing and all that, it takes time to practice in class. After your teacher marks, you need to do a correction, etc. Those skills will be built over time. But in your everyday life, being inquisitive and learning to have an opinion and justifying it, daily exercise. Okay, that's what you have to do. Okay, I see some answers. Let me see. In the bushes, there were hippos, leopards, and buffaloes that could harm or eat her. So, since she was afraid of all these animals that could be in the bushes, she feared to enter the bush. A rather long and unclear answer. So the answer is swimming in there somewhere, but it's not precise. If so, point one. Okay, so the one of the answers I read out, I'll read it again. Okay, these two answers share similar characteristics. The first one says, in the bushes, there were hippos, leopards, and buffaloes that could all harm or eat her. So since she was afraid of all these animals that could be in the bushes, she feared to enter the bush. Another student wrote, the hippos came ashore to graze and leopards slipped from their trees to hunt. If Mei Lin entered the bushes, she may be in great danger if she met these animals. Okay, so these two answers are rather long. There's nothing wrong with long answers. In fact, a lot of questions at secondary level, 2 mark, and they say explain fully does require an explanation. But these two students, your answers, the key point is swimming somewhere in your answer, but it's not precise enough. So one thing I want to tell all of you at secondary level is that your answers have to be precise, and clear at first glance. When I read your answer, it's very clear the student has answered the question, the student truly comprehended, and the student has a good command of the English language. Okay, that's why the answer is clear. Mm. Two more answers. Let's see. She was worried that predators such as hippos and leopards might attack her. Okay, here's another one. As there are hippos, leopards, and buffalo out there in the evening. Okay, some answers are not complete. So explain fully, 2 marks. Oops. So the wrong answers, no one gave this wrong answer. So if you had written Mei Ling was afraid of the buffalo, it's wrong because there's no explanation. Okay, what is the buffalo? Don't know. So unclear. Mei Ling was afraid that the animals would attack her. What animals? Don't know. Okay. Mei Ling was scared of wild animals. Now, Mei Ling was scared of wild animals. Does not answer the question fully. You can be scared of wild animals, but if you take certain actions and all that, you'll be okay or fine. So it's not complete, it's vague. So an answer like that would get the mark. The question says enter the bush in the evening, right? So this whole text about the evening, fine. In the evening, this part, the top part here, just look at the top part in the evening. What happens in the evening? In the evening, hippos and leopards would come down or be around that area, right? Hippos don't come ashore to attack her. They come ashore to graze, okay, to graze. But they are very violent animals, so you don't want to cross paths with them as well, okay? So in the evening, there were hippos and leopards. That's part one. These are the animals in the evening, right? And she was worried that these dangerous animals might attack her. So why was she afraid? She was afraid of the attack. Okay. So DC, you say she was worried that predators such as hippo and leopards might attack her. We need a bit more. You need to tell me that during the evening they are around compared to other parts of the day. They are around. So this would then be a complete answer. You get a detail from the text, particular phrase or detail, and then you infer why this detail would make her afraid. Because she's afraid of being attacked by these dangerous animals. Okay? So this is one. So it takes time for you to rewire the way you understand certain types of questions and also for you to know how to read texts more accurately. Okay? So you will be exposed and you'll learn. What about this question? This is one part of it was from just now, okay? Now there's another part, second part. So we stop at keep a wary eye for buffalo and choose paths through open ground. And the text continues. Whenever she did walk through an area of scrub, she felt her body tense and her senses sharpen as eyes, ears, nose, and brain scanned the air for the presence of one of the grey, hulking beasts. Passing into the open again, she felt a small thrill of victory, as if she'd cheated one of those old brutes by slipping past unnoticed. And this is a 1 mark question. What were the old brutes which Mei Ling was anxious to avoid? This one you don't need 1 minute. You just type out the word in the chat. What were the old brutes she was anxious to avoid? Okay, I'll wait 10 seconds. I shall wait 10 seconds. Hmm. Okay, okay. Ah, hmm. We know for sure that these old brutes are not humans, correct? Because it's just her against animals. So the old brutes cannot refer to humans for sure. But what animals are these old brutes referring to? Is it the hippos? Is it the buffalo? Or leopards? Let's do some tracking. Okay, I'm going to use my pen here to do some tracking. And this is a skill you will have to develop at secondary level because the text sentence structures get a lot more complex. Um, the writers who write these passages, we are no longer writing like a model composition type of text that you're familiar with. Okay, so let's do some tracking. Tracking means just to see what we are referring to. Okay, so I have a variety of answers in the chat. I'm not going to tell you what is the right answer yet. You tell me later. Okay, so old brutes. Where is the word old brutes? Okay, old brutes is here. So let's read backwards. As if you cheated one of those old brutes. One of those old brutes. And then I track back what was the last type of animal being mentioned. Grey hulking beasts. So old brutes refers to grey hulking beasts. Okay, so grey. And then the moment you see grey, leopards are out because there are no grey leopards, okay? So now it's hippos versus buffalo. Let's go back. One of the great hulking beasts. Okay, and we can go back all the way. When was the last time she mentioned an animal? Keep a wary eye out for buffalo and choose paths on open ground. Okay. And then after just before that, we talked about the hippos, leopards. So hippos, leopards in the evening, she wouldn't dare strike out in the bush like this. Okay. So in the evening, she won't go out in the bush because it's dangerous, right? In the previous question, she could get attacked. Now, she hasn't seen any hippo or leopard. So now, she just had to keep a wary eye out for buffalo. So now there's only one animal she has to look out for, and she has to choose paths through open ground. It's open ground. Open ground. Everything is in plain sight, right? Okay? Because every time there is like a scrub, uh, you, you're not sure if something is lurking. Okay? So open ground, everything is here, and then she needs to make sure that everything is visible to her. Okay, she can see. So whenever she did walk through an area of scrub, okay, so she's chosen a path, okay? She walked this path and then she walks through this area, she might start to get worried that there might be a buffalo lurking. Okay, buffalo lurking. But this time round, she didn't. She's back passing into the open again. Okay, she's now in the open again. And she didn't get attacked by a buffalo or buffalo. So the old brutes refers to buffalo. Okay. So you have to do some tracking in secondary school as well. Okay, let's move on. Oops. Oops. Let me erase. Okay. This is a interesting question. There are only three lines. Now the stones were steps for her or perches for lizards. Below the cool rocks, she knew there must be snakes. And in the scrubby bushes, birds waiting to sing their evening chorus. Question: how do we know that Maylin could not see the snakes and birds? What's your answer? I'll give you another minute. How do we know that Maylin could not see the snakes and birds? How do we know? Do we know as a question stem is not common in primary school, in secondary school. Any idea? Let me see if I'll wait for a while more. Ooh, okay. One student says she heard them slithering, but cannot see them. Where does it say she heard them slithering? Is it in the text? It doesn't mention what she heard. Ah, so that is your guess. So in comprehension, we cannot guess. We have to use what we see in the text. A good try, okay? So we cannot say that she heard them slithering if it's not there. Anymore. She thinks that snakes might be hiding under the rocks. The snakes were below the rocks out of her view. The birds were in the bushes, but as Maylie walked on open paths, she could not see it. Ooh, that answer is a bit convoluted. Must be precise, precise. Ah, Ting Li Hun says must be, the word must be. She was out exploring in the day. Snakes can't slither on stones. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the first wrong answer is this. The rocks block her from seeing the snakes and birds. But but the question is not whether the rocks were blocking her. Yeah, so you're supposed to infer, yes. How do we know means this question stem is asking for evidence. Okay? How do we know? How do we know? We know because there's something written here. There's something written here. And this something that's written here is this phrase. Knew there must be. Do we know that there are snakes? We don't know. We are not there. Did she see any snakes like hiding under rocks? She didn't see any snakes hiding under the rocks. Okay? She cannot see them and she's guessing. She's guessing. So instead of just saying there were rocks that blocked the snakes, or there were what answers are there? Okay, there were rocks blocking the snakes. We can say this. What exactly did the writer use to describe what she was, to describe her? The phrase, she knew there must be, tells us that she was assuming the presence of snakes and birds without actually seeing them. So we know that she could not see because she was just guessing. How do we know she was guessing? Because of the phrase, she knew there must be. Like that. That's the answer. So is it a demanding question? Yes, it's a demanding question. Because it requires inferential skills. It requires you to know how to read the question and what answer does such a question require. Okay? So along the way, you'll see challenging questions like that in your teachers, and my stretcher will teach you how to answer them. Okay? Okay, just to show you some examples. So, for example, just like I told you, you get text from all over the world, settings that are unfamiliar to you. So, for example, like this one, okay, the plumed serpent. The text examines a lady's experience watching a bullfight in Mexico City. Have you watched a bullfight? Have you been to Mexico City? Maybe not. But does it mean that you won't understand the text? No, because you understand language. Okay? So let's say there's a question. I'll give you some just examples. Okay, quick examples. Question says, how does the author create an atmosphere of pomp? In paragraph 1. Pomp is grand display. Okay? Explain your answer using 2 details from paragraph, 2 marks. What does a question like that demand? A question like that demands details. That means you need to identify parts of the paragraph, specific phrases or words. But that's not the end of it, you need to use these to link it to the atmosphere of pomp. Okay? So this is unfamiliar to you. This is something that you'll start to see at secondary level. Okay? So questions like that, or questions like that. They give you a chunk of text and then they say, is effective about the description of a tottering monument. At secondary level for language use questions, they are going to start to ask you, why does the author use certain words to express certain ideas? And does it work? Usually it works. And then they'll ask you, why does it work? So you're no longer understanding what the text is saying. That's level one, right? I know what the text means. Now you're expected to analyze or understand, why was the text written in this way? Why did the author use certain words to express certain ideas? What does it suggest about the author's opinion? Yeah. You'll learn some of that in literature as well. Okay, so they work hand in hand. So answering a question like that would involve, again, quoting a simile, explaining its effectiveness because it can convey something, an imagery. Okay, so this would be the complete answer. 2 marks, 3 lines. Okay, something like that. So yeah, it's more demanding, but you'll learn. IP students get stretch questions. Okay, for you to practice as well. These are questions that usually weigh about 5 marks. Okay, because you do get such questions in school. You could get such questions in school when you're looking at a text. Okay. Summary question. This is the one I told you just now earlier. Yeah, it is not easy, but the students will learn. And when your teachers teach, pay attention and practice. If your teacher say, okay, start practicing, you use all the energy and effort you have to practice. Then your teacher can tell what, given your best effort, what can you do and what the learning gaps are, and then your teacher can help you. At Sec 1, a lot of students, oh, Sec 1, I'm not in Sec 4, honeymoon year. Please don't think that way. Sec 1 is the best time for you to, of course, while dealing with all the other challenges I mentioned earlier on, for you to really build a strong foundation. Because the teachers are going to make sure, and they'll slow down a little bit, right? They're going to make sure you know all these things. If you miss this part, and as you move on to Sec 2, 3, and 4, things are going to get more demanding. And you really need these foundation skills, okay? So don't not honeymoon here. Learn seriously, okay? If you are starting to dream, ask your friend to nudge you awake, okay? So that you can pay attention. That's why I say surround yourself with the right people who will keep you on the right path, okay? Summary question, 15 marks. Content, 8 marks. Language, 7 marks. So content 8 marks, no longer than 80 words. So you will have to usually look at 2 or 3 paragraphs. Of course, that's more than 80 words, and then you're supposed to select points that answer the question, similarities and differences. All these individual points, then, because they are individual points, they're not the phrases, how to put them in 1 paragraph, not more than 80 words, with no errors in content and grammatically correct with a natural flow. So do you know how to use linking words like you used to do in synthesis and transformation? Okay, it will all be part of your practice when you do summary questions, okay? Yeah, so this will also be a new skill you'll be learning. Now, in terms of literature, I'm not going to dive deep because literature is another big thing that we'll cover in our master classes, okay? But just to give you a sense, in literature, some of the things that you are going to be exposed to, that you will also learn in English, okay? Things like tone, mood, features of the language. Do you know how to name these things, and can you comment on them? That means it's not just, oh, the tone is mysterious and ominous, full stop. Comment on it. How is it used? What did the writer say, and how is this tone created, etc. Okay? So literature you will learn, and you will learn how to phrase the answers. Okay? What about poems? A lot of schools will start with poems because poems, they can use song lyrics and all that, okay, like Golden and all that. And then it's very fun because songs are like poems. And then you unpack it, right? So when you read a poem, you go, this poem, when I read it, I have certain feelings, okay? Like, hold fast to dreams. For if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Wow, very emotional, right? I feel like, wow, this is true. But now I don't want to just know how you feel. I want you to write about it. What technique did the writer use? Why is it effective? Okay, so what can I say about my feelings? So, for example, first stanza is a paragraph in a poem, okay? The stanza. The first stanza begins with an exhortation. Do this. Hold fast to dreams, to hold on tightly to one's dreams and not abandon them. Okay, this whole stanza is about that. You must hold on to your dreams, don't let go. Second line uses personification. So you can recognize personification. We learned that in primary school, but can you talk about it? What is personification doing here? It's used to give dreams a lifelike quality. Like dreams are alive. They can live and they can die. Okay? And the poet also uses a metaphor. Life is a broken winged bird. Because life is life, bird is bird, but here it's a metaphor. Why? Because an injured bird cannot fly. And if you are a bird that cannot fly, then you cannot fulfill your purpose in life. Okay, so it's very sad. And that's why when you read this stanza, you go, oh, I feel sad. Okay, so in literature, you'll learn how to express and unpack and analyze these texts. Okay? So that's just a glimpse of what you will encounter. And for parents and students, now you get an idea. The purpose of sharing all these with you is not to make you worry, okay? It's to just help you to focus, get an idea of the challenges, and then strategize and get the support you need. And to remind yourself to be serious because it's not going to be a walk in the park, right? If you start out being disciplined and serious and you ask the right questions in class, you will benefit. You do your corrections, you will benefit. If your teacher mark your essays and you don't do your corrections, you won't learn anything. So you must be disciplined. You must be focused. You can have hobbies. You can use your phone, but are you able to put your phone away and focus on writing on an essay when you have to? Or when you're writing an essay, you keep thinking about your phone. That means you cannot focus. Okay? So learn to prioritize and focus and focus on your work when you need to do your work. Okay? So very quickly, I've mentioned all these already. For parents, if you're still looking at your child's work, I know at Set 1, some parents are still checking, okay, your progress, and you must be very grateful to your parents. Okay, don't say, I don't like it when you look at my work. No, say thank you for caring about me. Okay, do not complain about your parents if they would like to take a look at your work. Do you understand? Because they are working very hard already, and when they make an effort to want to be involved, welcome them. Okay, so parents, just take a look at their work. At secondary level, this is real, my colleagues and I, we're struggling with penmanship. So students, please write neatly, because if you don't write neatly, we can't mark. Or your handwriting just looks like spelling errors. So write neatly so parents can take a look at your child's handwriting, something very basic but not always done properly, and the kind of comments the teacher gives. Continue to build a vocabulary like what you've been doing in primary school. When you see a word you don't know, find out its meaning, how is it used, and use it in speech and writing. Okay, so all these, I've talked about it just now. Conversations, I know some of you like to talk to your friends more now. Okay, sure, talk to your friends, but make sure you speak in complete sentences, okay? Gather friends who are willing to do that because they also want to do well, not only in school, but they want to be good speakers, okay? And as you are doing various components in English language, be very aware of where your learning gaps are and seek help to fill those gaps early, not at Sec 4. Sec 4, we have a very short runway. So now, if there are learning gaps like, my grammar is still very weak, go and do grammar practices. There is no shame in doing primary 6 grammar practices. Go and get full marks in all those practices. Then editing. Go and do your editing practices, okay? Make sure your grammar is strong. Okay? Fill up those gaps first. And of course, to track your own errors, you can keep a journal or something like that. Up to you. Different people have different ways of doing it. But keep track of where you're at and whether those gaps have been filled. Okay? Let me take a look. Yeah. Continue to read widely because the more you read, the faster or the easier it will be for you to understand complex text. If all you do is to doom scroll on TikTok, how can you understand comprehension text about bullfighting in Mexico City? Very hard for you to switch from TikTok dancing to this bullfighting in Mexico City. Huh? Right? So don't just doom scroll. Doom scroll is the worst thing for your brain development, okay? Don't do that. Read or even watch documentaries. If you don't like to read all the time, you can watch documentaries, good productions, good documentaries, not short form videos. Okay? Listen to podcasts or interviews where people share their opinions. How do people share their opinions in such a convincing way that I straight away agree with this person? What technique did this person use? Listen and learn. Those are things that you can do in the next few years. Okay? All right. So, like I mentioned, upcoming there are master classes, so stay tuned on Luma. Let me give you the link to our Luma, okay, on chat. Give me a moment. Thank you, Sir E. Thank you. Okay, so I've come to the end of today's sharing. Any other burning questions at this point? Okay, if not, if you are already starting classes at Mind Stretcher, please always seek your Mind Stretcher teachers, okay? And clarify earlier rather than later. Okay, so if there are no other questions, thank you, parents and students, for joining me this Friday evening, and thank you, Sweat E, for supporting us tonight. Have a good evening, and I shall see you soon. Bye bye.